wonders world. I'm propping up this acanthus. This is Acanthus spinosus, and it sure is spiny. It's really prickly. And I'm doing that as much as anything else so I can get at the Alchemilla mollis that is underneath it. For the last 2 months, this long path has looked great. The combination of the yellow of the Alchemilla that has spilled over the path, and then the arching stems and flowers of the acanthus, and then the repetition of the green has been one of the nicest things in Longmeadow in the last 25 years. Almost accidental, because in fact what happened at the beginning of June, there was that tremendous downpour and thunderstorm, and it flattened the Alchemilla. So it then grew horizontal across the path. Normally it's a little bit more upright, and it was that freak of nature followed by the drought that made it look so good. But that's done, and now it's time to cut the Alchemilla back. And Alchemilla mollis is one of those essential plants that any garden has to have, because you can grow them in deep shade, you can grow them in some sunshine, they have lovely flowers, and they'll take any amount of cutting back. And then next spring they will look fantastic again. So it's a useful plant as long as you can keep it back, or, as we did, to simply not use the path. So one of the things that's happening today is I'm getting my path back. Coming up on today's programme, we visit a woman who's been successfully growing pineapples in Preston for the last 10 years.
I don't buy a pineapple now, because if I do, I have to plant the top.
We also have a look at a brand new 3-acre garden in Northamptonshire, based upon an 18th century model.
Just pick 3 fine plants like this, repeat them throughout, and it can work perfectly well, just like it does here.
And here at Longmeadow, I shall be planting pomegranates, as well as harvesting peas. Given what a long, hot, dry summer we've had, the dam garden hasn't fared too badly. The fern, the shuttlecock fern, Matutia, has got a bit frazzled, but that will come back perfectly well next year. The quinces have never been better. They like hot summers, and the fruit are looking great, and I'm looking forward to harvesting those in about a month or so's time. Obviously, the hostas are significant. We mainly grow large, thick-leaf varieties like Summon Substance, Snowdon, Siboliana, that are just too tough for the slugs and snails to chew. And the second is we have a mass of predators. So if we get a sudden surge of slugs and snails, then they get eaten up. One of the problems of growing big hostas like this one is that smaller hostas just get shadowed out. I'm going to get in here, lift out a great big chunk, divide it, and then I've got spare ones that I want to take up to another part of the garden. And this is where you've got to be brave. Be bold and strike hard. Okay, there we go. Normally this is a job that one would do in March or April. The problem with that is you always underestimate the range of their growth. So by lifting it now and dividing it and replanting, I can really allot the correct space to it. Here we go. I'm much more worried about the spade breaking than I am the hosta. There we go. Look at that. So I can divide that up. It's really heavy. I can divide that up into about 4 different sections. I think I've got a good new home for these hostas in these beds, and with a bit of careful division, I think I can probably make 4 new hostas out of that next spring will have a really dramatic impact. Can you hear that? I have never divided hostas in full growth before. I've always done it in spring. I'm assured by people I trust. In fact, I got this tip from the great Helen Dillon, who came here to see the garden. And if it's good enough for her, then it's good enough for me. There. Now And that is a nice new plant. We've got 4 good growing sections and stems. And so I can transplant that and know that that will make a vigorous new plant for next spring. The first one I want to put in is right in here. These beds are perfect for hostas because the soil is rich and water retentive, and hostas can cope perfectly well in sunshine if they've got plenty of water. The more shaded they are, the drier they can be. So I also get the same depth pretty much that it was in the ground before. I'll firm that in well. The next thing to do is just cut it right back. We've dug up the roots. We've reduced them dramatically, and the demand of the leaves will be too great for the root system and it will tax the plant hugely. Well, with a really good drink like that, the roots will grow, and that's what we want to worry about this autumn. And then next spring, with a good root system, those huge leaves will grow really vigorously. And don't be daunted by this sort of thing. Just give it a go and you'll be amazed what can happen. In fact, give trying to grow anything a chance, and it is very surprising how successful you can be. As we found out when we went to Lancashire to visit Dorothy Eastman, who has been growing pineapples for the last 10 years.
I've always enjoyed gardening ever since we were married. Keeps you happy and healthy, and it's not very good if it's pouring down and you've rain dripping off your raincoat into your wellies, but that's par for the course, isn't it? Goosner is just a small village just north of Preston in Lancashire. I've lived in this house and area for 46 years now, and now, like when I'm so-called retired, I've got a big garden and plenty to do. I must grow best part of 4,000 or 5,000 dwarf marigolds every year, different colours. So I buy 36 bags of compost at one go, 5 bags of bark, and I don't know how many packets of seeds. Then I sow the seeds usually mid-March and then start picking them out about April. Well, in total it'll probably be about 8,000 plants this year. It takes a couple of weeks to get them all planted out, then you sit back and wait and hope everything works out all right. It's a heck of a lot cheaper buying a few packets of seeds. I also enjoy the challenge of growing exotic fruit and veg. I grow melons, peppers and tomatoes. For the last 10 years I've been growing pineapples in the greenhouse, which apparently, according to the experts in this country, especially Lancashire, isn't very common. And if somebody says you can't do it, you have a go, don't you? Right, this is my hot greenhouse where I grow the exotic plants, and these are the peppers I am growing, and this is this year's fruit. And the flowers are very pretty little things up at the top there, into a pot. Cover it with a polythene bag, put in the greenhouse, and after a couple of weeks they should start showing through till we end up with one plant in a 7 or 8 inch pot, and hopefully that's the one you'll get your peppers off. And there's quite a few coming on, and they'll be ready to pick in a couple of weeks. And as well as peppers, I also grow melons. I buy melons from the local supermarket in about March, enjoy the melons, take the seeds out and grow my own. And now I am getting my own melons. And what I'm also seem to be getting famous for now is, as you can see in the greenhouse, we have pineapple plants. And if you look over to this one, Goosner Granny has grown a Preston pineapple. Apart from one year when I missed, I've had at least one pineapple every year for the last 10 years. But I've never had as good a year as this year, but I think that's definitely down to the hot weather. And this is how I propagate them. Just an ordinary pineapple from the supermarket, and I cut the top off, enjoy the pineapple, and then I start just peeling these lower leaves off, and you have to do it till you expose about an inch of the stump. The first pineapple I ever grew, it was fashioned back in the 80s to grow pineapples as a house plant. which I did, and the pineapple lived in the bathroom for over 20 years, never did anything, then suddenly, after 20 years, it grew a pineapple, and I'd say I've been hooked on growing pineapples ever since. So once you've peeled enough of these, you'll notice there's little nodes where the root system will start developing from. Just get an ordinary jam jar, and I just use a bit of cardboard to support it. Put it in that, and then leave it on a kitchen windowsill for about 3 or 4 weeks till you get enough root growth. Then I plant it into about a 4-inch pot of good quality compost, leave it in the greenhouse, then come winter, take it into the house, then next May, take it into the greenhouse, and hopefully, after about 4 years, you might even get a pineapple. I don't buy a pineapple now because if I do, I have to plant the top. And there's a limit to how many pineapple plants you can get in the bedroom in winter. Some people say I am obsessive, but I think I have to agree with them. But it's the one thing I can do. I love my gardening. Everybody knows that I'm very much into gardening. Give me a wheelbarrow, a bag of compost, some seeds. I'm happy. I'm not interested in your girly going to your spa days or anything.
Well, I'm with you there, Dorothy. I'm never happier than when I've got my hands in the ground and they're thoroughly mucky. Now, I want to plant something that's actually not in the ground. They need to go in pots because they're tender. And it's something that I've never grown here at Longmeadow, and that's a pomegranate. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to grow a pomegranate that sort of size to ripeness in this country. But even if you just grow them for decoration, they're fantastic because they have wonderful, intense orange flowers. And I'm going to pot up a pair, and I will keep them indoors in winter. And you can see they're fairly straggly, even raggedy plants, but they respond very well to pruning. And they're from reputable source. If you're buying these trees, which are exotic and come from abroad, do find out where they come from for biosecurity. Pomegranates really like hot, dry conditions. So they are brilliant for growing either as a house plant or in a conservatory. And the biggest problem with growing, say, oranges or lemons indoors is that invariably with central heating, it's much too dry and they suffer horribly. Pomegranates are the exception to the rule. As long as there's enough light, they will thrive. So this is my homemade compost of bark compost that I bought, sieved garden compost, leaf mould, a little bit of garden soil to add bacteria, and plenty of grit. Because we want good drainage. You don't want too rich a mix, because what you'll end up with is masses of growth and fewer flowers. Let's take this out. When you're potting up any of these fruit trees, whether exotic or not, don't be tempted to put them into too big a pot straight away, because the feeding roots have a very small growing area, and then if you have a large expanse of compost, all it will do is absorb moisture, and there's a real risk of it being too wet. An inch or two around the existing root ball is plenty. And you can see here that you have 3 stems, and they are all rubbing. And the truth is that 2 of those 3 have got to go. So I'm going to take it off right down the base. Quite dramatic, but immediate. Joe went to Northamptonshire to visit a modern garden which has elements of paradise at its core.
This is the old rectory, a stunning and classic garden filled with sumptuous, luscious planting. Drawing on the old rectory's 18th century history, this grand 3-acre space has been divided into 6 garden rooms with a contemporary edge fit for the 21st century family. And it's the brainchild of garden and landscape designer Anushka Filer.
Anushka, what a fabulous garden.
So where did you take your inspiration from?
It was largely inspired by the 18th century rectory and the architecture. The definition of a perfect garden in the 18th century had 6 parts. So it had a pleasure garden, a park, an orchard, a kitchen garden, a menagerie and an orangery. And so I thought it would be lovely to reinstall those elements into this garden, but give them a very distinctly 21st century twist. In the pleasure garden, for example, we've got a natural swimming pool. The menagerie is more about children and their interaction with wildlife, so we created a woodland area with lots of natural play, and we brought in quite a few quite semi-mature trees. We didn't want to wait 20 years because the children would be grown up and having their own children by then. And then the parkland that has a maze. The kitchen garden is more ornamental. The glass has this beautiful garden room that can be used at all times of the year.
Where are we now?
So we're in the heart of the flower garden. There's this exuberant quality to it, a real celebration of wonderful plants that do well in the UK, and it's just using the idea of creating this sort of heavenly paradise.
This is such a lovely shaded dining area in the shade of these plane trees, just nice simple formality, but a generous table with herbs in the middle just ready for picking. And I love the generosity of this garden overall. This terrace spans the entire width of the back of the house, but there's separate elements that are tied together really nicely. So here we've got a large planting area, just roses and grasses, and the grasses have that lovely soft textural feel but set the tone for the garden with a contemporary element. The planting tears up towards the back, and the grasses are a key plant throughout. And this terrace is in effect a sunken garden, so it's got retaining walls all the way around. But Anushka's designed them at the perfect seating height. Rather than just having a stone face, she's softened it up with lots of planting, green, lush plants that are thriving in the shade. Things like this Hakanakloa grass. And then we've got a water feature, and the sound of the water feature is just lovely on a warm day like this. It brings a cooling presence to the garden, and it lines up absolutely perfectly with the back door, and that axis runs right through the garden. There's a real sense of formality here. This is Anushka's interpretation of a kitchen garden, and well, it's a very loose interpretation, that's for sure, because she's having a bit fun with it. There aren't actually any edibles in here at all. She's got this wonderful Winchester Cathedral rose, a lovely white rose. We've even got white butterflies flying through here today, and of course the white planting relates to the house and that heavenly theme running through the garden. Now when that dies back, she's got this nice grass underneath. It says Cecillaria autumnalis. It'll add plenty of winter interest and texture to keep it going. And for the structure, there are 8 Osmanthus armata. And Anushka has painted the trunks of them white. This is a nod to the Mediterranean, where people paint trunks of trees to prevent pests getting in. And here is purely ornamental. She's painted this white, lime-based waterproof paint, which lets them breathe. But what it does is add a wonderful sense of theatre and atmosphere to this space. And if you've got an area of your garden where you think, oh, I can't quite keep on top of that, I don't know what to do with it, it's looking a bit messy, just pick 3 fine plants like this, repeat them throughout, and it can work perfectly well, just like it does here. This is a fabulous garden building, beautifully made, oak framed with a nod to the history of this location. And when I first saw it, I was slightly concerned about the placement of it in the garden, because you'd normally see a building like this tucked away in the corner of a garden or at the back rather than so centrally placed. But when you get inside, you realise why it is where it is. Because from in here, you have got a fantastic 360-degree view, and it's actually the axis of a lot of the paths. So you're looking down these paths to the seating area, looking down that wonderful avenue of hornbeams. This one, you're looking through to a fire pit and another seating area, and then this way is through the archway in the hedge, and then you sit down and you realise you are completely enveloped in the planting. Everywhere you look, you're looking out onto plants, and it's just fabulous. And this is a covered area, so all year round you can look at the planting as it decays into the autumn and as it emerges in spring. And okay, this is an all-singing, all-dancing garden building. It's double glazed, it's covered area, and you can get out into your garden and look out onto the planting. If I had one of these, I wouldn't be in the house, I'd be out in the garden all year round. It's fantastic.
You can go and see the garden for yourself, because this Sunday it is open under the NGS scheme for 1 day only. So if you're in the Northamptonshire area, go along and enjoy it yourself. Now, I have been getting huge pleasure from this dahlia, and I've got 4 or 5 of them here in the Jewel Garden. It's called Chat Noir, and it is the most voluptuous burgundy red that you can imagine, and these lovely cactus flowering petals. But it's also very tall, and this particular one has fallen over, and you can see the flowers are then turning back on themselves towards the light, so I need to prop it up before it gets too late. And the dahlias this year have been very tardy to flower. Ones like David Howard, for example, are only just beginning to bud up, whereas normally they're flowering from early July, and that's a direct result of the weather. But I made a note that this one seems to mind the heat less than others. There we are. It's still on a cant, but at least I can see it, and it will straighten itself out. And what a joy it is. I used to think that you couldn't have any pink in the Jewel Garden at all, and that I had to weed it out, so to speak. But actually, shocking pink works really well against the burgundy colours. So these 2 dahlias together, and the Cosmos, which is Dazzler, works supremely. This dahlia was fairly hidden by this peony. I was looking earlier and lifted it up, and there you discover that these seed pods, and this is a tree peony, Peony lutea, with yellow flowers. Of course, this time of year is the perfect time to start gathering seeds, storing them ready for next year. And there are a select group of people who grow plants primarily for the seeds. And we went to Monmouthshire to meet one of them.
My name's Adam Alexander, and I call myself a seed detective. What I'm doing is hunting down rare and endangered varieties of vegetables to grow for seed that I can then share with others. About 170 of us throughout the whole of the UK, and what we do is we grow out certain varieties of vegetables that are held by the Heritage Seed Library, and I'm very keen to be doing this in Wales, where there are a number of varieties of vegetables that are specific to this part of the world. This garden is in a little microclimate, looking out over the Bristol Channel in South Wales, and it's kind of my Eden. In this garden I am growing 60 or 70 varieties of vegetables. To me, one of the most important things is to reconnect ourselves with what it is that we grow and eat locally. In the same way as in Wales they're proud of their Caerphilly cheese, well, I hope that they're going to be proud of their award-winning runner bean. There are 4 distinct varieties of runner bean that have been grown locally here for a very long time, of which this is one, and it's called Stenna. And there was a guy called Mr. Stenna, unsurprisingly, from South Wales, who bred this bean in the 70s as a show bean. And it became a fantastic champion. And for 20 years, it was sort of unrivaled. And then he passed away, and the bean kind of fell out of use. But I am growing this in order to be able to return seed to the Heritage Seed Library so that other people can grow it. And I also share it with my neighbours. This is a ripening bean. It's only fully ripe when it's dry. These are ones that I've saved from a previous year, and this is how they need to look when they're properly dry. Today, like most days at this time of year in the sort of high summer, it's seed collecting time. It's very important to have this complete link between growing something, saving the seed, eating the produce, and then continuing that cycle over and over again. This is a broad bean called Seville, which I'd never grown before, and I'm growing it out for seed. And it's actually really, really lovely. And soon I'm going to harvest that. And then this is a French bean called Fowler. And I selfishly just grow this for myself and save a few seed. I'm not sharing this with anybody. And then this is my absolute favourite pea. It's a heritage variety called Robinson. It's very long, you get about 10 peas in each pod, and they are unimpeachably sweet and delicious. There are a couple of things to bear in mind when saving seed. First of all, the seed needs to be... That means that in the case, say, of peas, some of those peas may not be completely dry, so I like to put them out somewhere that's airy, away from direct sunlight, until they've completely dried off. And then I will put them in an airtight container, a jar, and stick them in the fridge. And there's really a simple rule, which is keep them dry and keep them cold. And actually, seeds will last for many, many years. I have seeds that I've had in my library for 15 years that are still perfectly viable. I love to save my own tomato seed. This is a variety called Lister's Protection Perfection, and it's British. Scoop out the seed into a sieve to clean, and you're left with lots of lovely clean seed. And then these I will put onto a piece of greaseproof paper. This is very important, greaseproof paper, because it means that when they're dry they scrape off easily. And then put this in a nice airy place to dry. Put them in an envelope, ready to sow next year. I am a completely unreconstructed vegaholic and seed anorak, and I do really get a kick out of finding varieties that have been forgotten or lost. There's nothing nicer than meeting somebody who says, look, I've had these seeds for 30 years and I can't grow them anymore. You grow them. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
I think there is a definite heroic quality to preserving seed like that, because over the last 40, 50 years, the varieties of seeds that used to be common have diminished drastically. All over the country, there were hundreds of different local varieties of almost every type of vegetable. And by growing these plants, keeping the seed, sharing, that is preserving an essential part of our heritage which otherwise will be lost forever. Now, still to come, Julia Sargent visits Board Hill to see a tree in flower, which may not be that extraordinary, except for the fact it's only flowered 4 times in the last 90 years. And I shall be harvesting here in the vegetable garden and also preparing for next spring. Now, Adam Alexander has sent me 4 packets of seed to grow myself, and I've got a winter November-ish and keep in the ground until Christmas time, he says. I've got Robinson, the pea, which he reckons is the tastiest and the best of the lot. Delaware, which is a spring and summer cabbage from Ireland, and a winter lettuce, Mesha. Now, all of these, except for the peas, can be sown now. So the first ones I'm going to sow directly is the radish, Pask. Now, the others are going to be sown under cover, but these I'm going to sow into this patch of ground. The onion here is still going. It's not ready for harvest, but I've got a corner here. And I'll just make a little drill with my hand along the edge, like that. Radish is not something that many of us think of as a winter vegetable. actually the Japanese in particular grow lots of winter radish, and this is a pinky red one. And Adam tells me that it's got a good crisp flesh. It actually grows quite big. I'm trying to space them out because the healthier the plant and the better the root system, the more flowers I'll get, the more seed I'll get. You know, I'm going to have enough for 2 rows. That's great. Just get down there. Now, you may not want to grow an unusual and rare seed, but you can buy quite a few different types of winter radish. If you sow them now, you'll be harvesting them in October, November, December, so do give it a go. Now we'll cover those over, like that. Now this is an investment in the future, but I've got a crop to harvest which has cheated the season, and it's delighted me. Because I thought my peas were a bit of a disaster. I sowed them as I normally do in April, and then overnight, one night, rabbits came and ate the whole lot off, and that was the end of it. And I sowed a second batch in midsummer, June the 22nd. It's a variety called Eddie, and it is suggested that it would be very good for a late sowing. And I just put them in the ground, I protected them against rabbits, and I promise you I've done nothing else at all. I haven't weeded, I haven't watered, I haven't staked them, nothing. And yet they've grown completely happily and presented me with a bumper harvest. Oh, lovely. That fresh, green zing of peas from the pod is fantastic. And to have that on the edge of September is a first for me. But it won't be a last, because I'm going to do this again next year. Yeah, right, I'm going to harvest these. Now, while I've been growing peas out of season, Frances has been enjoying literally the fruits of her season down on her shed allotment in Bristol.
It's a busy time on the allotment, with harvest in full swing. Luke and I are harvesting our plums, and we seem to have a bit of a bumper crop, which is really good news. Every year, the allotment has its very own produce show, and we've decided to go ahead and enter. With a month to go, we need to get our act together. Could our plums be prize winning?
Well, I think these might be gone over by September, but we can certainly do something with these.
Yeah, maybe some kind of preserve or jam. I think there's a thing in the competition for that.
There is.
There's weirdest fruit or kind of nobbliest vegetable or something.
Nobbliest vegetable. Any competitors for that, do you reckon?
Well, I've got a couple of beetroot which are going a bit on the gnarly side. I think if we kind of leave those in the ground, some of that.
Try, isn't it?
Plums come into season in August through to October, so there's plenty of time to harvest. With so many already ripe, we couldn't miss out on this opportunity to create our very own jam. It's easy. Chop up 2 kilograms of plums, add 200 millilitres of water, bring to a simmer and cook for about 10 minutes. Then add the sugar, ground cinnamon and lemon juice. Cook for a further 10 minutes, then increase the heat and bring the jam to a full rolling boil.
And it's coming on really nice, actually. I just need to let that cool down and set, and then we'll taste it later and see if it's good enough for the competition.
Over the year, Luke's really been getting stuck in. No challenge has dampened his enthusiasm. And today, he's working on making a greenhouse out of some upcycled material. While Luke grapples with his greenhouse, I'm cracking on with the rest of the jobs on the allotment, starting with sowing some winter crops.
And this is going to be a lovely coriander bed, which is one of my favourite herbs.
Despite its association with warmer climes, coriander is as tough as old boots and will keep on growing well into the winter months.
So what I've done is just made a little trench about 2 centimetres deep, and I'm going to just pour in a nice scattering of seeds through there, and then once they germinate you thin them out about every 10 centimetres you want one plant. And if it is a dry autumn and they do start flowering and seeding, the bonus is you can collect all those seeds either to sow again or to eat. Cover them all up, give it all water, and they should germinate quite quickly in this lovely warm soil. And there are loads of other vegetables that you can
Spinach and chard are all really good things that will keep performing through the winter, and now's the time to think about them. For a first year on allotment, we've actually had quite a good harvest this year, but I really want to make sure that next year we continue to do so. And I'm going to propagate my strawberry plants. Now, strawberries need doing quite regularly. About 4 years you have out of them, but they will stop being as vigorous, stop producing as much fruit, and can get prone to disease. The nice thing is they're really easy to propagate, and they kind of do the work for you. At this time of year, they send out runners or stolons with small plants on the end of them. So all you need to do is get these plants to root, cut them off, and then you have a brand new plant that will give you much more vigorous growth in future years. Fill a small pot with compost and insert individual offshoots from the parent plants. Peg down and make sturdy with something like a coffee stirrer. As soon as it's rooted, you can snip it away from the plant and move it to anywhere that you want it to go. Having an allotment hasn't just helped me to hone my vegetable growing skills. It's also reinforced an idea I've had for a long time that there's always somebody that you can learn something from. And here, they're often not very far away at all. Sam Stevenson is one of our neighbours. He's nearing the end of his second year on the allotment and doesn't mind sharing with me the trials and tribulations he's had along the way. Hello, neighbour.
Oh yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, great.
This is your second year here on the allotment, isn't it?
Yes, so I was mainly over that side growing lots of potatoes and things like that last year.
Yeah.
And I've worked this area, sort of terraced in, put these big raised beds in, plenty of compost.
Really? So this whole area started the same time as Luke and I started ours?
Yeah, pretty much.
You seem to have come quite a long way further than we have.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit more of a sort of industrial approach, I think.
But it looks lovely. I really like the look of this with the big posts coming up. It's very kind of architectural, isn't it?
Yeah, and these sort of enable you to net as well.
Yes.
To sort of keep the butterflies away.
So I'm going to feel reassured that the reason that this looks so much more advanced than ours is because you had a year practicing on this side beforehand as well.
Made a few mistakes.
What did you learn from the first year?
Well, I learned mainly about things like how close I'm planting plants together. I mean, I haven't quite got the hang of it. As you can see, they're all sort of a bit intermingled still this year. Now I've got these big beds, I can plant stuff I know is going to do okay.
Yeah.
And then I can sort of start experimenting a bit more. So I've tried out doing some peas this year.
Nice.
And I'm sort of planting at different times as well, because another thing I learned on the first year. So I've got sort of a couple of different crops of corn. And I'm sort of trying out some aubergines.
They look amazing, your aubergines.
Yeah, they've done okay, actually.
They are perfect, unblemished leaves, aren't they? Are you submitting?
And some rhubarb jam.
How's your rhubarb jam turned out?
Pretty nice.
We'll be in direct competition.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Well, may the best man win, or the best jam win, I should say. But the proof is in the pudding. And now it's time to test our jam. That's really good.
Really good.
I hope they like it. Do you have a chance of winning?
I'm going to say yes. As an optimist, yes, we're definitely going to
I'm going to
win.
say yes with a pregnant pause beforehand. Cheers.
Cheers, Owen.
I love homemade plum jam. We've got an old plum tree just on the edge of the house. The truth was, it didn't taste very good. And then Sarah made them into jam. And that very bland fruit is transformed into nectar. Now, there are big transformations in this part of the garden, actually, because the squashes are really putting in a growth spurt. And I'm going to have to start picking off fruits to keep them small soon. But for the moment, they're doing really nicely. This is the chicory I planted the other day. And the carrots have had a mixed year. The first batch germinated terribly badly. That's not uncommon with carrots, particularly with an early sowing. But I did a second sowing, and I used a variety I'd never come across before called Nigel, which is a good late season carrot. Nigel, do you want to come here for the opening ceremony of the carrot? Come around here, come on. Okay, in here is a carrot named Nigel. Let's have a look. Just loosen the soil a bit. There we go. There we are. The carrot Nigel. Have you seen that? Look at that. Nigel, is that delicious? Would you like one? No, he doesn't like carrots. But they're shaping up nicely. And importantly, there is no evidence of carrot fly. Carrot fly you notice because you get little holes, like pock marks on the outside, and as you cut through them, they've been eaten through by little maggots, which of course are the larvae of the carrot fly, which lays its eggs on the surface of the soil. And the best way to avoid them is to harvest them in blocks. Clear an area, don't leave any behind. And that means the ones that are left have not been disturbed. So I'll just take a few more there, and then I've got a clear piece of ground. And actually that's the size I like to eat them. That's exciting, that's good. Most root crops have actually done well this year, which is counterintuitive because you would think in a very hot, dry summer that root crops would suffer. My early main crop, I've got two varieties I've not grown before. One is purple, Violetta, and the other is bright red, which is Red Emily, and this is the Violetta. I want to see what they look like. So let's just take the tops off gently, take that out. Oh look, there you are, I can see potatoes coming up with it. Look at that. I have to say, they're not instantly attractive, but interesting. Now this is a variety that is said to stay purple when you cook them if you keep the skins on. Most purple vegetables, in fact, change colour when you cook them. But these guys could give you, if you cook them in their skins gently, they could give you purple mashed potato or purple chips, if that is what you desire. So a rather sort of dirty looking outside, but then when you scrape it away, you can see there's an interesting interior. And if I cut across that, and there it is. There is a purple spud. A tip about when you're harvesting your potatoes. If you're going to do them all in one go, cut off all the foliage and the stems. Take them to the compost heap, then leave them for a couple of weeks, if it's not too wet, and then dig them up. And the skins will harden up. The harder the skins, the better they will store. Now, moving gracefully from the earthiness of purple spuds to exotic plants of Board Hill in Sussex. And Juliet Sargent went along to see one tree in particular. And that's because it's flowering, which is something it doesn't do very often.
The gardens at Board Hill Garden in Sussex are beautiful in their own right, but for plant historians, they are an absolute paradise. This garden is a living museum full of rare trees and shrubs collected by plant hunters from all over the world, and it's all the vision of the man who created it. Colonel Stevenson Robert Clark founded Board Hill Garden 125 years ago. A keen zoologist and botanist, he sponsored several plant hunting expeditions and asked for specimens from as far afield as China and Tasmania to be brought back to his home for cultivation. As a result, Board Hill contains the best private collection of champion trees in Britain. This is the pride of India, or the golden rain tree. It's just one of the very unusual species here in the garden. Tiny seed, and it's been nurtured to this magnificent maturity here in the garden. This tree is a Colruytia, and because it comes from Eastern Asia, it just loves hot, dry weather like we've been having. It flowers in the height of summer with tiny yellow flowers that then develop into these unusual seed pods. And they're just starting to dry out now. You can hear how crispy they are. And inside are the seeds, which will become dark brown later on. Just imagine it was a seed like this that travelled all the way from China to West Sussex in the 1930s and has resulted in this fantastic tree. The golden rain tree isn't the only tree to benefit from the heat wave. The hot weather has brought one of Board Hill's rarest trees into bloom. In the 90 years that it's been growing in this garden, it has flowered only 3 times. But this year, it's done it again, and it's possibly the best display yet. The Emenopteris henryi. I've been coming to this garden for years, and I have never seen this tree in flower. It's so exciting to see it covered with blossoms. They're these beautiful tubular-shaped flowers, and then really interesting detail is these bracts on the side. And just standing here, the scent is wonderful. It's a sort of light lemony scent with a little bit of cucumber and even some jasmine in there. It's absolutely wonderful. It originates from China, where unfortunately it is endangered now. But in its native Chinese forest, it can grow to 45 metres high and live to be 1,000 years old. Andrew John Stevenson Clark is the great-grandson of Colonel Clark. So, Andrew John, it is wonderful to see the Hymenopteris flowering. When was it that your great-grandfather planted this tree?
Well, my great-grandfather received some seeds from the Victorian plant hunter George Forrest, which came all the way from central China, and he planted this in 1928.
How does it feel to finally see it flowering?
Oh, delightful, and a huge surprise, of course, because my grandfather and my father would come along here and think, I wonder if it's going to flower, and see nothing. And so I was looking at it thinking, well, it doesn't flower here, it never will. You can see that the little flowers, although small, are really pretty to look at. It's got this little white bract on the side, so from a distance it looks really interesting. But in the spring it also looks lovely with no flowers, because the little red bit that you can see here actually shows that in the spring you've got this reddish colour to all of the leaves, which is unusual.
So it's a good all-rounder as well?
It certainly is, yes.
Why do you think it's flowered now?
This year has been particularly hot, and it's the heat that it flowered. It has had before a cold winter as well. But I don't think that's been the spur, because if you look at where it comes from in China, they don't have particularly cold winters.
And now that it is flowering, what do you think the chances are that it will be pollinated?
Well, the bees love it, and they visit it, but I wouldn't want to hold hope that it would. But of course, if we had seeds, not only would we plant some here, but we would share it with other gardens as well.
I am sure that your great-grandfather would be very, very proud.
Well, I'm sure he would have been, and it's only a sadness to me that my grandfather and father, the two generations in the middle, didn't see it, and how delighted we are as a family to see it flowering. So it's not just my generation, it's my children as well. This way. Yeah, come on.
Up here on the mound, I've got Chinese goat horn, which flowers in some cases once every 90 years, or at least there's one in Northern Ireland which took 90 years to flower. So I don't think I shall see that. But I'm going to plant a eucalyptus, which will give you a performance on a display almost quicker than any other plant. And this is a particularly delicate one, which I think will work here up on the mound. This is called France Bleu. And what I like about it is its delicacy. And then there is a kind of pinky, almost coral-coloured flush to the stems. It's very, very nice indeed. Now, eucalypts are not wholly hardy, so hopefully this will survive. We get up to, or get down to, I should say, about minus 15 here. It won't like that, but I could protect it a little bit. And the drainage is quite good up here on the mound. It doesn't need particularly good soil. So if you've got fairly poor soil, this is a good one. And on the mound here, we have a substrata of stone and rubbish and all kinds of stuff, and then just topsoil on top of that, so that's good news. It's been grown in one of these pots that allows the roots access to the air. So you just unwrap it like this, and actually that can be reused. Take the bottom out, and there you have a sort of honeycombed root system. And because these are the fresh new roots, they haven't wrapped around and nice and straight, that should grow out into the soil nice and quickly and adapt. Well, while I'm just filming it, I'll go and get some water and give it a drink. Here's some jobs for you this weekend. If you've got a spare patch of ground, don't leave it empty all winter, but sow a green manure. There are a number to choose from, and I'm using Dahlia here. The virtue of a green manure is that the roots provide good organic material, they open out heavy soil, and the top growth can then be dug in spring, adding fertility as well as structure. The Dahlia were a little late in flowering this year, but now they are at their very best, and the butterflies love Dahlia more than any other plant. And it is important to deadhead as much as possible. Get as high as you can, cut off all those spent flowers, and that will stimulate new growth, and the butterflies and you will be able to enjoy them well into autumn. This is an easy job. Pick runner beans. The more you pick, the more that will grow. So harvest them before they get too big, enjoy them, and keep on picking regularly. Come on then. The end of August and the month of September is the perfect time to be cutting hedges, particularly evergreen hedges like this yew one. The birds have finished nesting and they will remain sharp right through winter. But whatever type of hedge you're cutting, there are certain things to bear in mind. The first thing is that every hedge, whatever type it is, grows thicker and faster at the top than it does at the bottom. So when you cut your hedges, you should always cut them at a slight angle, which is called a batter. The second thing is it's much easier to cut the sides before you do the top. Now I'm choosing to use hand shears because they're sharp and I enjoy using them, but it doesn't matter whatever you use, make sure it's sharp. It'll A, be easier and safer, and B, it's much better for the plant because instead of crushing it, it just cuts it cleanly and it'll heal better. Now's the time to do the top, and there's a little trick to make sure it's crisp and even. With a low hedge like this, it's quite important that it's reasonably level. So what I'm looking for is a low, tight, clipped hedge. It'll take another few years before it looks as it will finally be intended to be, but we can help it along the way. I'm leaving this end piece to make a finial, but you can see there's much more growth at this end than there is here, for example, in the middle. I'm just going to cut to the line. There we are. We're beginning to get a hedge-like appearance back into that. I do think that one of the secrets of enjoying hedge cutting is not to see it as this terrible chore that you have to do, but an enjoyable job. You're making something that is a really important part of the garden and can be very beautiful in its own right. So I'm going to quietly keep doing this for the next hour or so. But that's it for today. And we'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at our normal time. So until then, bye-bye.